All right. Hello, everyone. It is noon on the East Coast. Good day. This is the August Policy Pulse from the Afterschool Alliance. I am Chris Knightsey, Director of State Policy. I am not Erik Peterson. I'm filling in for Erik. Most folks who follow these probably see Erik up here sharing his wisdom on all the things happening in DC and at the state level when it comes to after-school policy. But he is not joining us this week. He'll be back in September, so you've got me. Um, we can move on to the next slide. Just some general housekeeping notes. We are streaming this conversation on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, we've got a question form that folks can submit ahead of these policy pulses. So feel free to drop in some questions, especially if there's something you want to hear on next month's broadcast in September. Be sure to submit those before that September policy pulse. And thank you, Lucy, for dropping that in the chat. All right, so we're going to do a quick overview of kind of what's happening in DC. A reminder for folks, it's August, so that means it's August recess in DC. So Congress members are not here in Washington, DC. They are actually back in their districts. So in your districts, probably holding a lot of town halls, visiting a lot of programs or sites or businesses and all that stuff, having lots of different public appearances. Um, so that means it's a little bit slower here in DC. So we've got kind of a shorter policy update, and then we're going to hear from an expert in the field, an after-school ambassador of ours, Dawn Fickett, on site visits and how to host and plan a successful site visit with an elected official. But first, just some recapping some things that happened over the last month. So just a reminder, I know a lot of folks were following this, but through the month of July, we had a big advocacy push at the state and federal level when it comes to funding for education. So on July 1st, funds that were expected to be received from the federal government by states, including 21st Century, so that was 6.8 billion in education funds and 1.329 billion in 21st Century funds. States were told that they would not be receiving those on July 1st. They were under review. So lots of advocacy happened between July 1st and July 21st. So lots of contacts to Congress, contacts to governors and attorneys general, lots of media appearances, lots of op-eds, lots of stories run in local outlets and national outlets. A lot of advocacy actions were engaged in by the field. That resulted in those 21st century funds being released on July 21st. Not long after that, later that week on Friday, the remaining education funds, those were the $5.5 billion in education funds, were released by the Department of Education and the Office of Management and Budget. So good news there, a huge win for the field, a huge thank you to all the folks that reached out to Congress and that engaged in all these advocacy efforts. Thank you for all the work. It was because of all those efforts that we were successful in getting those funds released to the field. There are still a few different funding streams that are being withheld, just a reminder. So, and we've got more information on this on our blog, especially around AmeriCorps. There are some funds there within AmeriCorps that are still being withheld. There are also some youth mentoring grant funds that are being withheld. So not all the funds have been released, but we did get a huge chunk of those funds released earlier last month. Moving on to FY26, that's kind of where all of our focus is put towards now. We had another big win last week when the Senate Appropriations Committee marked up their FY26 appropriations bill and included 21st century, not only just included 21st century, but kept it level funded. That's a big pushback against what the administration had proposed back in May when they wanted to essentially eliminate 21st century and consolidate it into this K-12 simplified funding plan, which would have been a big block grant that was actually cut by $4.5 billion. So good news there is the Senate supports after school, maintain funding for after school along with all the different title funds that the administration had proposed consolidating. So great win there, and I think a lot of that is due to the efforts over the course of July and raising that awareness of what after school is and how it impacts programs all across the country. So we've got a lot of support in the Senate now. Next up is the House. So since everyone is on recess right now, and when they come back, that'll be back in September. The House will mark up their education appropriations bill, and we'll see where after school stands uh, on the House side. So I think we did a lot of great work in raising the awareness. So hopefully we're able to maintain dedicated funding, but we'll see where things stand. Then we'll pivot to what, September 30th. That's the big deadline for the federal fiscal year. So the current funding that we're under, FY25, ends at the end of September, September 30th. So in theory, the government has to have a new budget by October 1st. We'll see what happens there. Most likely, there is some sort of continuing resolution for a short amount of time, which would maintain funding at that FY 2025 level for a certain period of time. There could be a government shutdown come October 1st. A lot will happen when Congress comes back in September. So, what that means is our advocacy continues. So we had a big win in July, but we need to continue to push our members of Congress to support after school. That can happen in many different ways. It can happen in email outreach, in phone calls, but a great way to do that is to make sure that Congress members actually see those programs in person, have a chance to experience what the kids experience, visit the programs, talk to the staff, talk to the families, talk to the kids, really understand how important those programs are to the communities and the kids that are in them. And we have with us today a true rock star when it comes to holding site visits, our 2023 After School Ambassador, Dawn Fickett from Maine. I'm excited to hear what Dawn has to share with you all when it comes to how to successfully plan and pull off a site visit with elected officials. So, Dawn, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Um, thank you everyone for joining us and for having me here to talk about this. I would probably say I'm not an expert on this. I'm still learning a lot of the different ins and outs of how to engage with our members of Congress, but I've definitely had some success over the years, and I'm happy to share what I've learned. Next slide, please. Uh, so I think it's important to just remember why we engage with Congress about these issues. Congress they do hold the purse strings. Federal after-school funding lives or dies in appropriations. Maine is, fortunate. We have a connect with Senator Susan Collins, who's one of our Maine senators and is the chair of the senator side of appropriations, and co-sponsored the original bill that funded 21st Century. So she's incredibly invested, and I'm very happy to hear that she's advocating for us still. Members of Congress want to support things that they can feel success and like they have wins with, and the things that receive a lot of high bipartisan support are when we're talking about our kids and what's best for our kids. So as we know, with 21st Century, we experience a lot of bipartisan support, and it's an easy sell in many ways for us to get our members behind advocating for this important federal funding stream. We've learned that site visits can really help personalize and humanize the impact of what 21st Century dollars are doing for our kids, for our communities, and also it helps them see what would be lost if those funds were to be reduced or eliminated altogether. Next slide. So it's important to understand the landscape of how they operate. Our members will have an office in DC, and then their local offices, district offices throughout the state. And so there's many different ways that we can connect initially with our members and their local staff. Staff are the gatekeepers often of their members. They are the ones that typically know things before their members do. They filter and funnel information up. So I remember my first year doing visits in DC for the After School for All Challenge and remember feeling disappointed that we didn't get, FaceTime with certain members. And I quickly learned that that's really okay and sometimes better because their staffers are the ones that are often making connections with constituents, learning information, and then passing that along to their members. And so those relationships with their staff are just as important, sometimes more important. So don't feel discouraged if the first, several times you are connecting with their office that you're really just navigating in a meeting and talking with their staff. They once you get those relationships going, that is really where you can kind of leverage that relationship and connecting with the member themselves. Um, so our members, they care about what's impacting constituents. They want political wins. So it's important to remember that we have a really strong voice in advocating for our youth. They want to hear these stories. And so I have experienced that they really do make effort to connect with you, whether that's at the local level or when you're in DC. So don't get discouraged if it feels like it's starting off slow. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. Next slide. Um, I'm sure that a lot of you have had chances to connect. There's many different ways that you can. I'll share a little bit about some of our experiences. I direct a 21st century program in the state of Maine and central Maine, where we're, housed within a school district. I've done the After School for All Challenge since 2020. Each year it's looked a little different. Of course, we lived through COVID. Some of those initial that 2020 year, it was just phone calls with members of their staff. From there, they then turned into Zoom visits. Sometimes we were able to connect with members through Zoom, but it was often their staff. The year that I served as ambassador, I sent formal letters introducing myself. Those letters actually really made a significant difference. I was able to connect with their local offices and as well as the DC offices and had meetings with several of their staff members prior to my DC visits. And that really helped make those, I was able to have connections and talk to members when I had FaceTime with them about my meetings that I had with their staff. Lights On After School is an incredible opportunity. You're showcasing your program. Our program does a very a community-wide open house. We invite the whole community to come and see our program in action. We do a huge family event. We always invite our members. This year, we don't have members locked in to come for this year, but we do have local staff who have committed to coming from Senator Collins, Senator King, and Congressman Golden. There's in-person meetings a lot of times with your local district office. They have time to set up, a sort of a coffee date and talking about your program. They can come and visit. They can set up. I've had many conversations with the local staff, just in terms of, especially this year with where funding is at, they really do want to know. So there's lots of different ways that you can connect with your members. The big days like the After School for All Challenge, of course, is a great way to get this started because that is a day that all 50 states try to engage. But there's also other opportunities for you to present these site visits and showcase your program. Next slide. Okay. So for scheduling a visit, it's it's often because I started out our journey with connections at the DC level. We I was connected with the DC staff, and every time we would go to our members' offices for the After School for All Challenge. This is a pro tip for everybody. Grab business cards for every person that you interact with that joins your conversations. these staffers are, as I said, are critical and very important, and they're the ones that really have the connect with the members. And so all of my follow-up emails, I include all the people I meet in that office. But they also are the ones that will connect you right directly with the district, the stateside district offices and their staff there. And that's how we got all of our site visits done this year, was through local district office staff. So you can start right there at your district office. Don't feel like you have to start these. I apologize. I'm in an office and there's an elevator behind me. I hope that's not too distracting. Um, you don't feel like you have to start at the DC level to make these connections. It's perfectly okay to start at the local level. These staff members have quality time with their members, even though members are often in DC. When they come back, these staff members are the ones that pick them up from the airport and take them to their meetings. They're the ones that they have a lot of time that we don't even realize with their members. So they have their members' ear, and we know that they are talking to their members about these important issues. When you're asking, if you're sending an email or a letter, keep your ask clear. Be specific about why you want them to come. This year, we absolutely said we want them to see how important these federal dollars are and the impact that they have on our community. We want them to see firsthand what that looks like and how they can really lend their voice in the advocacy for these important federal dollars. So the next slide is just an example of the letter that or the email rather, that I sent out to our members. And it's specifically, I would send to their scheduler. That's an important connection to make in the local district office. If you make a connection there first, they can often connect you to the scheduler if you don't already have the scheduler's contact information. But we just wanted to make sure that they understood, like, we want to showcase, the incredible work that's happening with 21st century dollars and how they can be a champion for after school. So we were, pretty clear in that email. We made sure to include logistics. We can get the visit done in 30 to 45 minutes if that's all the time they have. Oftentimes they'll let you know what they have for time, and you can then sort of plan accordingly. This year we had visits last anywhere from an hour to two, which was great. It gave us a lot of really great time to showcase our program. Next slide. So hosting it's definitely a fun experience. It can feel stressful because you really want to make sure that you're showcasing all the really great things, and there's often a lot of really great things to showcase. So kind of filtering down like what it is that might be the most important things to emphasize about your program. It's pretty important to showcase your kiddos. So, and having your kiddos drive these site visits is really, I think, highly effective. This year, it was pretty great to see some of these seasoned political staffers interacting with our kiddos. Our kids asked some really fun, great questions. And those interactions, it was just so heartwarming. And that was really, I think, beneficial for them to see, to put a human face to this issue. But having, your kiddos plan the welcome, have some students do the tours, do a little showcase or a performance if that's available to you. I think it's really great being able to connect parents, elevating the parent voice. It does help these members understand the impact that these federal dollars have for working families, and how critical and vital it is to be able to access high quality, often free after school programming for their kiddos. Make sure to carve out time for you and the member or you and the staffer to be able to talk. They will have questions for you. They will want to engage in some nuts and bolts. So make sure to leave time for that. And lastly, make sure to take a lot of photos. Um, this past year, that was where I failed. Just I didn't have someone set up specifically to take photos, so I was a little bit lacking in that area. Um, the next slide, we'll talk about some things to do for follow up is in the next slide, I guess. But so just talking about your program, I always make sure that I have leave behind packets for any of my visits with members or their staff or site visits. I have, a folder that it's not a ton of stuff. I don't want to overwhelm them with information, but just quick infographics, visuals. We always have, every year we do a local impact statement that we share with key stakeholders. And I always make sure that our state and federal lawmakers have copies of those every year so that they know some of the great work that we're doing in our community with our youth. Another kind of great thing to highlight is how these federal dollars are being used. Lawmakers are really interested in seeing how we braid and blend funds, available federal funds together to sustain our programming. Our program uses a lot of different federal funding sources, and I have a pretty effective infographic that shows how critical federal funding is in this work, not just 21st. And they're always really keen to see that and to really helps paint the picture of impact, like what it looks like to have these federal funds available, and then also what it would look like if these federal funds are reduced or go away. Next slide. It's important to remember that you do not have to be politically savvy. You don't have to know all the ins and outs of what's happening in DC to be able to successfully carry out these site visits, whether it's with a member or a staffer. You're the expert of your program. You're the expert of the after school world. You know your community. You know what's going on. And to them, you're the local hero. You're the one that's doing this great work, and they want to hear about the work that you're doing. I encourage you not to feel nervous or worried that you're not going to, come across as politically savvy. They don't need that. They just want to hear from you about what's going on in your community with your youth. One of the staffers this year that came to visit, actually, no, it was Senator Collins in our visit in DC. We had pulled together dozens and dozens of letters from parents and students and educators and administrators in our district, sharing why after school was so important to our community. That was part of our Leave Behind packet this year because we knew we were facing a pretty uphill battle with funding. And Senator Collins was very excited about receiving these letters. And she said, it really helps lawmakers humanize these issues when they have stories of impact, when they know how, these programs impact working families, what they're doing for kids, how teachers can benefit, from their kids being in high quality after school programs. She said for her, it really helps her build muscle in this fight because she can replace dollar signs with human impact, with stories about what's really happening, to everyday Americans. So that's kind of a thing that I've kept in my mind as I've engaged to really make sure that we're telling our stories. Next slide. So after the visit, keep the connections going. They will have a lot of questions for you, and you might not have all of the answers. Make sure to follow up with them, like research, find out the answers of the things that they're asking, follow up with them. I always make sure that I send them a digital copy of any of the paper, leave behinds that I have. Oftentimes they get flooded with paper, and so that's one tip an education policy advisor had given me several years ago, that they'd much rather receive digital copies of things versus keeping track of all of these leave behinds that, constituents will leave with them. Make sure to send thank you notes. We had our students write those thank you notes. I think that adds a little personal touch. Invite them again in the future. I always leave an invitation to our next big event in a leave behind packet. Our Lights On event is obviously our biggest. But sometimes we have quite a few family events throughout the year, and they're pretty big and well developed now. So depending on when the visit's scheduled, I just try to make sure the next big event, there's an invite in there for them. Tag them on social media, any of the pictures that you've taken, even if it's not with the member, themselves, if it's with their staff, if they've come to visit, make sure to still tag the member. Um, Another thing that we really make sure we do when we have site visits is that we schedule our building principals to be there, our district administration, our superintendent, assistant superintendent. They very much are aware of how critical these funding pieces are and what it would mean for our community. And I think that really speaks loud volumes to our members and their staff to have that representation there at these visits. Next slide. Just some other pro tips that I've learned along the way. Um, don't assume that the staffers will know what 21st Century Community Learning Center grants are and what they do and what the function is in a community. Typically, members will, but new members may not. So, in a gentle way, educate them on what 21st Century is and why these grant dollars are so important to our communities and our students. Highlight local context. Don't assume that they know what's going on in your community. That's one thing that I've been told several times. They need to know what's happening in your community. So this year, as I'm sure a lot of communities across the country, we were impacted by the loss of AmeriCorps funding. We were impacted by the loss of the mental health funding, and those all tie into the programs and services that we provide. And um, they didn't know that our town had an AmeriCorps grant, and they didn't know that our schools were, receiving the mental health funding. And so we really made sure moving forward that we were communicating whenever something was impacting our district and specifically our after school program. That was something, a pro tip, if you will, that one of the staff members had given me. Another one is, as you're making these connections with your multiple different lawmakers in their local offices as well as their DC offices, I do group emails now. And that was some advice that Senator Collins, local district staff member, gave me, was that they all communicate all the time. They're working to benefit your state. And so they're working together pretty collaboratively. They all know each other. And he said it's beneficial for us to send an email out to everyone that you're connected with, so that they're all getting the same information, and they can all have those conversations together about the impact for your community. Lastly, building these relationships. For some of these members, they are with some of the staffers. They've been with their members for 10, 15, 20 years. So these relationships can really be long lasting for you and your district. And that's really it. I'll hand this back over to Chris, but I hope this was helpful for everyone.
Thank you so much, Don. I would imagine this is incredibly helpful for everyone here. So thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge. Quick question for you. There was a question around the infographic. Is that something you can share, the infographic you mentioned that paints a picture of the funding?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I
Awesome.
can. I know Jillian has a copy of that, and Eric probably, but I can absolutely
Great.
send that along to
We'll
you.
uh we'll include that in the follow-up email. So
Sure.
so we'll get that from you. We'll include in the follow-up email from this
Yeah.
and then that'll be accessible to other folks. There's one question that I was going to pose to you. Hopefully, there's time to answer, but it was a question around information set, the funding. So the federal funding that comes to the program. Do you all have those? How do you communicate to the parents and the community members that this is like federal funding that supports the program? So when they're talking about it, they understand that, or are they talking about the program just in general?
We've been pretty transparent with our families about how we're funded and, the program would look like without this funding. Parents are really involved with us in our sustainability planning and our sustainability models. So for us, we've found just being honest and transparent about, all of the different ways our program is funded. So the parents can actually, like, obviously we have to be really careful about using lobbying, type specific language, but parents don't have to. They can be really honest about, for them what these impacts would mean. And we've definitely had parents be very, very truthful and
Yeah.
outspoken. And that's worked in some ways to our advantage.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Don. I know there are lots of other questions. We'll try to answer all those as much as we can in the follow-up email. Few things here. We've got a couple slides as just reminders. So here's our first. This is our QR code and also a URL link underneath 3to6.co/Congress. This links to a take action to contact your members of Congress to thank them for supporting the release of the funds for FY25 for 21st century, but also continue to push them and support after school in the upcoming appropriations bills because that's incredibly important that we make sure that they still understand there is a threat to after school. Next slide. And again, Lights On After School is just around the corner. So October 23rd, 2025 is Lights On After School, this year's Lights On After School. So registration is now open. If you're planning to hold an event, please register that in our database so that we know and we can track all of that. And we'll be rolling out more information, more resources over the coming weeks. So stay tuned. And then last slide is just a link to our policy updates. So if you want to stay updated on all the things that are happening, all the blogs that we've put out week to week on all the different happenings in Congress, you can sign up to that using that QR code in 326.co/updates. Thank you all for joining the August After School Policy Pulse. Eric, we'll be back in September and we will see you then. Thanks so much.